All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Victory Friday here on your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson. You are listening to All in Horns on YouTube and where all podcasts can be heard. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And in a double overtime thriller in the second round of the SEC tournament, the Texas Longhorns stay alive, survive in advance. It feels like March Madness, the actual tournament itself, has already begun for Texas. It is already a win or go home situation. And now it seems as though they might have had a little bit of a cushion with a double overtime win over the heated rivalry of the Texas A&M Aggies. Well, heated rivalry, that's remains to be seen. But a big brother picking on little brother, 94-89 in double overtime in the SEC tournament, where Texas A&M was 6.5-point favorites. Texas ended up winning the game, and will play Tennessee today. And so, Jake, what a game! If we go back and forth on our text exchange, it was "We're dead, we're alive, we're dead." No, we're alive.
Undertaker meme. We're out back of the coffin.
Yeah. But it was a really fun game. A lot of gritty play from Texas. I think the way the game progressed and the way they played throughout, even in double overtime, I would have been proud of the last two performances of the season. The fact that it's a win and possibly, very likely, maybe gets Texas that last in spot of the last four teams in the tournament, winning that game, especially with Xavier losing, especially with Indiana losing today. That really bumps Texas up a couple of pegs. And so, yeah, maybe playing in the big dance.
Yeah, I have a lot to say from this game. First off, I feel like I should still be negative towards the team moving forward because they apparently respond to our negativity.
Oh, I'm not
because every time we give up
another game.
Every time we give up on them or pick them to lose, that's when they play well.
That pattern will continue throughout the rest of this podcast.
And maybe Chindo Weaver is just the most important player in the history of Texas basketball. I mean, that play clear. We had mentioned that during the season, how big of a role we think that plays, but clearly it plays a big role. And Rodney Terry has made some clear adjustments as well. To give Rodney Terry some credit, because we have ragged him plenty, but also Rodney Terry is Randy Marsh, the meme from South Park. Just, I didn't hear no bell. He didn't get fired, and he's going, there's still some years left on my contract and I want to coach him out. And this doesn't save his job for good or anything, but very, 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 very possibly saves his job for at least one more year. And if they make the tournament, it's deserved. Sometimes when you face adversity, that's when your real colors come out. And
Jake, there are plenty of times I've mentioned it on this podcast, Jake. There are times where we see teams, whether it be a Michigan State who ends up being an 8 seed, or a UConn that's an 8 seed, or a North Carolina that's a 9 seed, a North Carolina State from a season ago who ends up being an 11 seed and ends up making a deep run because their season didn't actually officially start until conference tournament time. And then they make a deep run in the conference tournament. They make a deep run into the March Madness tournament. Why not Texas? And that's the only thing I keep telling myself. And then I start getting this hope. And then all of a sudden now they're kind of playing their best basketball at the best time of the year.
Yeah. And when you get into March, anything can happen. And now you're very possibly playing to not even have to play in Dayton against Tennessee. It better than playing against Auburn or Alabama, who I just don't think Texas matches up against. Against Tennessee, I mean, still a tough matchup. Tennessee's really good, but
they're just extremely physical. And we played a double overtime, extremely physical game against A&M, and that's
this team finds a way to win against Tennessee, I will be all chips in the middle. Yeah. Because at that point, how could you not?
Why not? Why wouldn't you? You're just a miserable fan if that's the case.
And they're playing more players. I mean, Weaver coming back opens things up. Mark appears to really have found his stride with the team now. I really wish this could have happened a couple of weeks earlier. They'd be in a really good, I mean, they'd be in a great position if this just happened a little earlier, but I mean, first off, I cannot describe how funny it is, how freaking hilarious it is that one of the best teams in A&M basketball history goes 1-2 against what's been a bad Texas basketball team.
Yeah, fair.
They're playing good right now, but
It's
they've
a
been
fair,
bad on the
yeah.
season.
And
And
yeah,
that itself is hilarious. Second off, Will Taylor is their all-time leading scorer now. I just want to say he's a great scorer from the free throw line. He is a free throw merchant because he just bulldozes into people, gets a foul call, shoots 20 free throws, and scores 25 points. I think he scored 28 tonight, like 18 or 19 of them were from the free throw
Yeah.
lane. I have less respect for him as a player than I think I ever have had, which is saying a lot because he's an Aggie. But just between that, the fact that this rivalry went on pause for over a decade and it has just picked up right where it left off. The fact that their basketball Twitter account hasn't posted the final, or sorry, X, the everything app, has not posted the final score still.
at
It's just,
the time of this recording.
it is so funny to see everyone get to see A&M for what they are, which
Their
is
true
losers.
colors. Their true colors.
Losers and cowards.
Yeah. And Jake, before we start, dogging Texas A&M too much, I do want to give our players some praise, starting with Caden Shedrick. However, no matter how slow and clumsy and can't catch a basketball to save his life cleanly, that he plays on a regular basis, going 10 for 10 from the free throw line wins you this game without a doubt. And big free throws in double overtime, big free throws in overtime, big free throws at the end of the second half. Caden Shedrick, sir, you've earned my respect, and I will back you as a player. Now, if you continue to bobble rebounds and passes to the inside and throwing off the timing of what should be an easy dunk, easy lay-in, he also got the game-tying field goal on a wide-open dunk with about 2 seconds remaining in the first overtime to send it to double overtime. So good positioning on his part to find the open space. But Caden Shedrick, first and foremost, big shout out to you. You already mentioned Kendall Weaver. I thought he played a phenomenal game. They even mentioned it on the broadcast in terms of he's not going to be a stat stuffing, just box score maniac when it comes to his play on the court. He does all the things that don't show up on the box score. That was talked about on the broadcast and how important he is to the team. It showed again. It showed against Vanderbilt. It definitely showed today against Texas A&M, or yesterday against Texas A&M. And for Trey Johnson, I thought that he had a decent shooting performance, but for him to go and lead the team in scoring with 20 points and to have a shooting performance like he did and kind of disappear, I would say at the end of the second half and the first overtime, hit some big shots when he needed him to. And like you said, Tournement Mark and Arthur Kaluma, big game from Kaluma, a lot of 3-point plays, a lot of plays with contact. He really got beat up down low, and he held his own. Him and Shedrick held their own when it came to getting beat up and playing the physicality of Texas A&M down low on the block. It doesn't always show up on the box score, but it showed up on tape against Texas A&M, and it was a big reason why Texas ended up winning this game.
Yeah, I mean, the balanced scoring all of a sudden from this Texas team is and a lot of it, by the way, one change Rodney Terry has done to me that has made the offense for whatever reason, it's revolutionized the freaking offense, is just making Tournement Mark the point.
Yeah.
Mark is the point the majority of the time. And all of a sudden the offense runs completely differently.
You've got Pope and Larry who are primary scorers. They should be playing the shooting guard role anyway. So the fact that they're coming up and dribbling up the ball and running the point is crazy to me whenever you got Tournement Mark who's making these crazy round the body passes around defenders, getting guys up in the air and going up for a lay-in. And all of a sudden he's got the ball just being whipped out to Trey Johnson for a wide open 3 after he's got 2 or 3 guys committing to him. I'm like, what? Were we not aware of this skill set earlier in the season. Like, he's been doing this the last 2 games. Like it's commonplace and it's common practice. And I'm just shocked that we haven't seen it until now. And I mean, rather late than never, but my God, like it's incredible to me the completely different looking team that this team has been over the last 2 games.
Yeah, they had 6 players in double digits today. 6. Shedrick, all the starters.
Double overtime. Double overtime.
Double overtime, but I think they had 5 after regulation or
Yeah.
close to 5 after regulation.
Yeah.
I mean, your leading scorer is Trey Johnson with 20 in a double overtime game against A&M. You lost on the road to Arkansas just a few weeks ago with Trey Johnson scoring almost 40 points.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, this has truly come out of nowhere. Absolute nowhere for them to play like this for it's only a 2-game stretch, but they are playing complete basketball for full games, which we had not seen we hadn't seen that in a single game the entire season.
Yeah.
Even in their stretch of better basketball, they were not playing even close to this level. And I mean, Rodney Terry, this was the only way for him to save his job. He's probably saved his job. And now this team has hope, legitimate hope that they can win games in March.
I will say this. I didn't love Tournement Mark's jumper at the end of regulation. I like the time that they took, but I thought there are moments still, and it's college basketball. You're not going to see perfect basketball played by Duke. You're not going to see perfect basketball played by Alabama or Auburn or anybody. But there are moments still where it's like, okay, why do we have one guy dribbling the ball for 20 seconds and then the offense doesn't get going until there's 8 seconds left on the shot clock? Like, what are we doing here? You know, like, can at least move the ball around or get open, or you see a player get trapped or hold his dribble and then he's got a defender, you know, getting tied on him. And there's no help from the offensive guys. There's nobody getting wide for him and helping. And there are moments that still show up. And I'm like, guys, this should be fairly basic to like open up for your teammate and pass the ball around, you know. But I do understand at the same time what Coach Rodney Terry wants to do with the skill set of players that he has. Every player on the floor, at least for 4 of the starting 5, can create their own shot. They can get open and they can make mid-range jumpers. They can get to the basket. I like Tournement Mark getting to the rim way more and getting aggressive and getting into the paint. He may not make everything, but it does force the defense to collapse, and that opens up the perimeter. Now, if I see Shedrick shoot another 3, I'm done. I'm out for the whole season. Can't happen.
He shot 1 today. That's 1 too many.
1 too many. I don't necessarily love Kaluma shooting the 3, but I'll take Kaluma shooting the 3 more than I will Shedrick.
He can make it. If he's open, I'm fine with that. When you're running, you know, you got Mark going into the lane, dish it out to a wide open Kaluma, take that shot. But
I do think that is Mark's game. And I think that we're starting to see this in the last 2 games open up the offense so much more, to your point about making Mark the point.
Also, they had a great game plan for A&M specifically, which granted they played them twice before this, broke the tiebreaker with this game, but the game plan was to take advantage of what A&M does. A&M crashes the glass on both sides of the court. All 5 players are going to the glass to get defense rebounds, to get offense rebounds. How do you counter that? You fight for the rebound and you haul ass down the court. You have 2 guys run an outlet and you just go fast break immediately. And Texas just sprinted on them in the first half, and A&M didn't have an answer for it. They answered for it a little bit in the second half, but Texas still scored 40 points in that second half. I mean, A&M scored 46 in that second half, shot way better from 3 than they ever do. Other than in the 2 games against Texas, they lost, where they shot really good from 3 in both of those games. Because they did hit 12 3-pointers in this game, which for them is a lot. And they just didn't really have an answer for that. Texas took care of the ball incredibly. They had 2 turnovers late into the second half. They ended the game in a double overtime game with 6 turnovers to A&M's 13.
That's incredible. And
I mean,
Jake, honestly, having only 13 turnovers in a double overtime game is still pretty impressive. And the
It's
fact
not
that
bad.
Texas had more than half of Texas A&M's turnovers really is a testament to how well they protected the ball.
And it didn't even really feel like Texas's turnovers happened ever in pivotal moments. I hardly even remember any of them.
Right.
A&M had some pivotal. The defense made some huge like steals and turnovers, and that's been one of my complaints is they just weren't generating enough steals. The turnovers were always just self-inflicted errors by the opposing team, and they're still not, this all-star defensive team, but they're working their asses off to get rebounds on the glass, and they have done incredible on the boards against two very good rebounding teams in Vanderbilt and A&M, who's the best rebounding team in the country. Now you got another really good rebounding team in
I was about to
Tennessee.
say, you got Tennessee coming up, and they're no slouches on the boards either.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC is a very physical league in basketball this year, but
and how about this, Jake? Trey Johnson not going to the free throw line at all in this game. I'd like to see him get away from the perimeter. Now,
he did get fouled about 6 times on drives.
Yeah, granted,
with how they called it in the second half.
You want to talk about the refs, Jake? Do we want to just get on that?
They were terrible on both sides. Of course, A&M. I've seen A&M fans blaming the refs, which is hilarious because they were terrible against Texas.
You can blame it on both sides.
They shot more free throws, by the way. They shot 9 more free throws in this game, and had the softest flagrant foul ever.
Texas had 2 more fouls called against them, 27-25. There were over 50 fouls called combined in this game. I mean, Jake, if these referees, they probably need a new whistle after this. They probably ran out of breath blowing their whistle so much. I mean, it was absurd. It was a ref show for sure. A lot of the whistles weren't whistles, and then a lot of the no calls should have been whistles. Unfortunately, they were all over the place. I mean, it was bad on both sides. I can't give one team the advantage when it comes to free throws or to the foul count. But it was it was a well-played game. The largest lead for Texas was 9. The largest lead for Texas A&M was 5. And that came in the second half of play. And so just all around, just really good, well-played game that Texas came out on top of. And you have to win games like this if you're going to make a run into March Madness. You have to.
Yeah, and I mean, it's I just keep getting back to the point that it just blows my mind we're seeing this.
Jake, you texted me. You said it kind of pisses me off a little bit.
A little bit. I mean, it does, because you're just like, if this team had been here for even if they only got to this point halfway through SEC play, they win so many of those games down the stretch, they'd be playing for a 4 or 5 seed.
And Jake, I think the reason why it's frustrating is because I do think we were beginning to see glimpses of of this version of this team midway through the conference season. And then you drop your games against Arkansas, you drop your game against Vanderbilt, and you're like, okay, really? Come on, guys. Like, what are we doing here? Obviously, you drop against Bama, then you win against Kentucky, and you're thinking, okay, it wasn't a great game. And then it just completely falls apart in the last little section of play following Kentucky. And you're just like, okay, we saw glimpses against Ole Miss, which ended up in a loss, but Ole Miss, a good basketball team, which very frustrating that they won today because, Chris Beard effect. But you definitely saw it against LSU, and we're like, okay, we saw this brand of basketball being played. Can you make it into the final push of the season? And it didn't happen. And so you're just thinking, well, the season's over. And now you've got the best version of this team that we've seen all year. In my opinion, there's a large gap.
Yeah, huge gap. Huge gap. Large gap doesn't cover it. I mean, it's just, you got to give Rodney Terry and the staff credit. I've criticized them all year long, and
Jake, let me ask you this, Jake. Say, just hypothetically, and I know what the answer is going to be, but what if Rodney Terry wins, say, a game, gets to the round of 32 this year, goes into the next season, he's coming back, starts off a little slow. are we going to start giving him the benefit of the doubt of, hey, if he's a coach that just gets the team to March, he's going to have this team playing ready for March? Is he just a March basketball coach? Is he just bred? Because we see it with like guys like Tom Izzo. Tom Izzo, Michigan State teams, they tend to just kind of trail off to start the season off, and you're like, okay, what's going on with Michigan State? And then all of a sudden, towards the end of conference play, they're kind of making a little bit of a run. Then out of nowhere, Michigan State wins a Big Ten championship tournament game or a tournament. And then they're going into the March Madness tournament as red hot as they possibly can be. And you see Michigan State make a deep run as a 5 seed, a 4 seed, a 7 seed, a whatever seed. And Tom Izzo just has this recipe for success in March. Do you think that Rodney Terry might have that recipe if we see something out of this year's team making a somewhat of what you can call a run?
I'd say if they made the Sweet 16, I would start feeling that way. Because like I've said, to me, when you make the Sweet 16, that's a really good season at Texas.
Great season. Yep.
That is to me like not necessarily the standard where it's like if you don't make that, it's a failure. I think getting to the round of 32 is the standard at Texas, even though the standard hasn't been met enough in the last decade plus. But to me, if he gets to the Sweet 16 at some point, you're like, okay, he's been here 3 years. Granted, the first year, half an asterisk. It wasn't his team, but he still coached the majority of the year, but it wasn't his roster construction.
Right. Correct.
Which does matter because the way he constructed this roster is still flawed.
Yes.
They have one big man, basically. I mean, Shedrick he's inconsistent, but huge today from the free throw line, especially. But if he makes the Sweet 16 this year, you kind of have to say that he'd be at Texas for 3 years with an Elite 8, a round of 32, and a Sweet 16.
Yeah. Yeah. It's impressive to me.
Now, will I be sitting there saying extend him? Still no. No. But I will give him another year. I'll give him a pass in year 1 of the SEC. Let him revamp this kind of retool this roster a little bit. Get some new faces in, maybe build it a little bit better built for the SEC. One thing that is the difference between, call it softball, baseball, well, maybe not so much baseball. That was more of a Schloss effect than it was anything else. What Sark did, knowing that Texas was getting to the SEC, Sark got this roster ready. He got an SEC ready. He got bodies built for SEC football, whether that be softball. Vic Schaefer did the same thing on the women's side, knew what the competition was going to be with South Carolina and other teams in the SEC and LSU that you're going to have to compete with to win this conference. And I think that those coaches did a much better job of getting their rosters ready for the new conference, whereas Rodney Terry did not. You have a lot of small you have a Big 12 roster in the SEC. Well, not even a Big 12 roster because the Big 12, I don't know if Texas would have been a little bit better in the Big 12 maybe this year just because they're not as deep and physical. But this roster was not built to succeed in really any other conference, maybe other than the ACC. And that's just because the ACC had a really down year this year. Yeah. They just lack big men. And he has to get a big man next year.
Kaluma is a 4, but shouldn't be one of your leading. He shouldn't be what you rely on.
He's the best rebounder on the team.
He is, and he shouldn't be your best rebounder.
No, you got to have a big man other than Shedrick. I mean, you have Onyema, and some of these guys will develop. They do have a lot of young guys on the roster who can develop. Hopefully, you keep Weaver. You got some parts that you are going to be able to keep, and then you got to build around that. And I think Rodney Terry, what's going to decide Rodney Terry's fate from this point, because he's more than likely earned his another year.
Yeah.
And there's going to be fans who don't like that, and I do get it to a point because it's been frustrating, and last year was frustrating at times.
I've already called him getting fired multiple times. I had it set in my brain.
That's why I was so hesitant to do it, though, because you're not going to fire him if he makes the tournament. It doesn't make sense from a financial standpoint alone.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be like Chris Del Conte is going to be singing his praises of like, this is our guy forever. Like, it's not going to be like it is with Sarkisian because they're still not meeting his standard. Because I mean, Del Conte's standard is compete for championships, national championships, and every single. And this team still isn't going to compete for a national championship this year. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I love for them to prove me wrong. Jake, I highly doubt that.
What's competing in college basketball? Sweet 16, Elite 8?
Elite 8.
Elite 8 is officially like competing.
I mean, unless you just get blown out in the Elite 8, but
yeah.
I mean, if you get to the Elite 8, you're in the final 8 teams. I mean,
and Jake, I mentioned this to you too, Jake. This Texas team is essentially already in the March Madness tournament in terms of how they're playing these must-win games. You can't slip up. Texas A&M was already in the tournament. Win or lose, they had their seed solidified. They're good to go. They're in the tournament. They're playing in March. For Texas, Vanderbilt was a must-win game. Had to win that game. Texas A&M had to win that game. Tennessee, you might not have to win Tennessee, but if you do beat Tennessee, you're on the right track of actually maybe possibly being an 8 seed. You might actually be the higher seed of moving forward and into the next round. And so
you're going to be at a Dayton. Right now, I feel like they're more than likely in. I'm still not going to say 100% because the committee does weird stuff. They're more than likely in because their record against quad 1 teams, by the way, is sneaky really good.
Yeah.
I mean, not really good, but they're like 8-9 now in quad 1 games, which for a team with 18, 19 wins is really good. For as bad as the season has felt, their record against quad 1 teams is actually pretty damn good.
Well, first team out is Indiana, Jake. They lost today. Big loss. They were one of the last teams in. They're the first team out. Texas now listed, according to Joe Lombardi's bracketology, which was updated at 6:00 last night. Is Texas is the last team in currently with Xavier as one of the last teams in. They lost earlier. North Carolina. Did North Carolina win their game today, Jake? Did you see their score?
No, but if you keep talking, I'll pull
yeah,
up
I
some
think
of
they
these
played.
watch.
I think they played Wake Forest, and Wake Forest is the next 4 out. North Carolina is the last 4 in. I would imagine that North Carolina would have won that game over Wake Forest if that is the case.
Yes, they did. 68-59. You feel like that probably puts which by the way, North Carolina is, unless Wake Forest may be quad 1, but before Wake Forest, I think North Carolina was 1-8 in quad 1 games.
They are one of the worst constructed North Carolina teams we might see, and they're going to be a tournament team. But very rarely do you ever get to see North Carolina.
That's because of the conference they're in.
Yeah.
The ACC is terrible.
This year, yeah. And the only reason why they're getting in is because the ACC is so weak this year.
That's
right. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I was
and OU at time of recording in a very close game with Kentucky right now. I think OU's just in right now. They're not even on the last 4 in or last 4 buys, but I would imagine if Oklahoma loses, I'd imagine they're still technically on the bubble. I don't think
they are not listed as any of the last teams in or first 4 teams.
They're listed as a 10 seed right now.
Yeah.
Which I could see OU still not making it if they more than likely in, but they could still not make it even if they did lose to Kentucky.
Yeah. BYU with a win over Iowa State. I'm just kind of looking at scores now as we're kind of wrapping up this episode of just kind of notable games that may have been of interest to some people. Texas Tech beating Baylor 76-74. That probably does that put Baylor out of the tournament, or are they in?
I think Baylor's solidly in. By the way, Texas would be at 12 right now playing Xavier and Dayton.
Wow. I actually don't mind that matchup.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be playing Arizona in the next round. I mean, you're in the tournament. You got to beat good teams.
Yeah.
I think Arizona is not any better than A&M or probably better than Vanderbilt, but a team you could beat. Baylor is in right now as a 9.
Okay.
They'd be playing Marquette round 1.
Man, that Marquette game, Jake, that was a fun game. And Xavier losing, but backdoor cover for Xavier. But Xavier was up by 15 points at one point in that
14.
game? 14 points. And then Marquette came back and won that one. Not that would have.
Oh, we haven't mentioned it. Cooper Flagg hurt.
Yeah. So that, for anybody who's not just, up to date on all things college basketball, Cooper Flagg, best player in the league, will be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. Plays for Duke. Duke was down by 14 points in the first half to Georgia Tech. During that comeback, they ended up winning that game. But to start that comeback, Cooper Flagg landed awkwardly on his ankle, was wheelchaired into the locker room, but did walk back out onto the court on his own power, sat on the bench, did not return into the game, but came out on his own power, walking without any assistance, and just sat. Didn't have it wrapped up, didn't have a brace on it, didn't have a boot on it, but just sat on the bench and watched his team come back and win that game against Georgia Tech. So his availability moving forward, it would really suck. So for me, I love watching big time individual players play big in March Madness. It's just fun. You get a John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, duo making a run. It's just fun to watch. Even if you hate them, I'm not a Duke fan. I'd root against Duke at all times. When it comes to North Carolina or Duke, I probably root more so for North Carolina than I do Duke. But I don't want to see Cooper Flagg not play in the March Madness tournament.
No, I mean, neither one of us root for injuries for any team, even teams we hate.
Yeah.
Other than maybe Deshaun Watson. That might be the only injury I've ever applauded.
Better player than he is a person.
Yeah, and he's not a very good player either.
No, he's not.
But yeah, I mean, I want to see Duke at full strength. I want to see Cooper Flagg play. I haven't watched him play a ton because, quite frankly, ACC games have just not been of interest.
Well, yeah, and it's East Coast. It's hard to watch East Coast games sometimes.
Yeah, and so I mean, I want to see him play. So hopefully he's good, but the excitement for March is now even higher with Texas making this run. Because like I said earlier in the season, where some people, I will always disagree with, and maybe I'll say it in the heat of the moment, but disagree with the, I want my team to lose so they fire the coach. I don't want to make the March Madness tournament. I think that's loser talk and bad fan talk. Now, I'm not saying I maybe haven't been guilty of it before, but I think it's just not, it is being a bad fan. And I did want to say, and I wish I had the tweet saved so I could pull up the handle so everyone could go harass this person, a Texas fan, on Twitter. Worst tweet I've ever seen in the history of tweets.
Okay.
Which was, I would rather, he said, I don't care if Rodney Terry wins the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament. I want him gone. I'd rather them not win either than him keep his job. He would rather Texas not win a national title. And Texas has never won a national title in basketball. Never played for one. That is the worst post I've ever seen on the app.
I almost feel like that's got to be a troll. It's got to
be an A&M fan posing as a Texas fan.
It's got to be something along those lines. Now, I did mention to I think it was an NC State fan. Apparently, their head coach might not return or isn't planning on returning.
He's fired.
Oh, he's fired. Okay.
No, he got fired after going to a Final Four last year.
Gotcha.
And then he was saying it was pathetic that Texas could fire Rodney Terry because he made an Elite Eight 2 years ago. An NC State fan was saying that.
An NC State fan was saying that about Rodney Terry, whose coach was just fired after making a Final Four. But he thought it was insane, the fact that I had brought up. I said, look, Rodney Terry's fired unless he makes a run into the SEC tournament and he gets to March Madness, and then it's kind of up in the air. But if he wins a game in March Madness, he's probably secured his job for sure. But if he loses against Vanderbilt, this was before the Vanderbilt game. I said, if he loses to Vanderbilt and Texas doesn't make the tournament, Rodney Terry's gone. And he just thought that was the most absurd. Like, he was like, oh, that's so funny. That's so cute and funny. I was like, okay, I'm not even going to waste any more of my time on you. But that it just is ironic to me. It's funny that coming from somebody whose coach just did that. And
Yeah.
got further.
Oh, and then when someone pointed it out to him, he said, context. And it was like, oh, so context only matters for your coach?
For your team? Yeah, for your team.
Yeah.
So. But
There's
anyway,
been some
Jake,
bad
hey,
takes.
yeah,
Bad takes.
Yeah. We need the bad takes account. Expose bad takes.
Predictions for Tennessee?
Yep. Predictions against Tennessee. Thoughts on Tennessee? What's just real quickly, what's a take on it? What's your vibe?
You feel like this is where they run out of gas, right?
Yeah,
Double
absolutely.
overtime game, very physical game against A&M.
They're going to be playing a
Tennessee
very fresh Tennessee team.
Rested. I'm going to pick Texas to lose regardless. I'm just going to keep picking them to lose every game.
I will not pick them to win another game for the rest of the season.
I'm going to keep doubting them. And if they want to keep shutting me up, I will more than oblige to be calling myself an idiot.
Yep.
I have no problem with that. And so, yeah, I mean, I still think they're going to fight at this point. I mean, I don't think they're going to go out there and just get blown out. It could happen. I mean, you're playing 3 straight games, a double overtime game, both very physical games.
The emotional drain as well. There's an emotional drain to it as well.
Beating A&M, I mean, to win the series for the season, basically.
Yeah.
And to feel a lot better about making the March Madness tournament. Now, I'm sure the players are going to be like, we're not secure. And that should be the thought process. But
for sure.
I think they'll keep it close. But I think Tennessee in the second half, at some point in the second half, they're just going to pull away and win by like 10. I'll go 68-58. I think it'll be a little bit lower scoring game. Tennessee's rust maybe hurts their shooting early. And Texas, I think they'll lead for some of this game. They're just going to run out of gas. I mean, and I won't judge them for that. With what they've done.
I want to see here's what I want to see out of Texas. I want to see fight. I want to see grit. I want to see that passion of this is a must-win game, as though your future lives are on the line in terms of the rest of your season is on the line in this game. I want them to play with that type of intensity. I don't think that alone is going to be enough, because I do think that they're worn out. I think their legs are going to get tired. And quite frankly, I think this team could use a little bit of a break. Not saying that they should lose this game, obviously not. But they lose this game, you just kind of play your cards into the March Madness, even if you've got to play in Dayton against a Xavier for a 12 seed, whatever it is, you live with that. But obviously go out there, you try to win the game. If you can upset them, great. Stick it to Rick Barnes. I'd love to see it. But I do think Tennessee wins this game. I'm going to say 78, 62, 63. I think it'll be kind of like a 15-point game just towards the end of it. But I do think Texas is going to be in it at halftime. I think it might be a 5-point Tennessee lead or something along those lines. I just think it gets broken out towards the end of the game. I think it's just going to be too much.
Yeah. By the way, my under bet absolutely shattered. In the
you and I both said under 138 or whatever it was, and
granted, it went to double overtime.
It took double. I'm going to say what was regulation, Jake?
Talk for a second. Let me math.
It was, I believe, because I know Texas scored 40. Texas A&M scored 46.
146. They broke it in regulation.
They did break it in regulation. So okay. Well,
and the total was 183.
I'm glad I did not bet the under on that game.
Yeah, me too, huh? Hey, I got the Xavier backdoor, so
yeah, you make up for it.
You
go 500 in bets, then it's a win.
I did go 500 today.
Nice.
And I don't have any ongoing bets.
Other than the Xavier backdoor, what was your best bet?
I mean, the Xavier backdoor was my best bet.
Yeah.
I bet Oregon, and I teased the lineup. So they were like 3.5, 4.5 point favorites, something like that, and I put it to 7.5.
Okay.
So I got
they dominated.
plus odds on it. They won by 13.
Yeah.
I just wasn't a big believer in the Indiana team. And Oregon's a pretty solid team that's been starting to play better.
Can I say something about Indiana real quick? I think Indiana is a team that if they are good, they're going to be like actually really good. They will be a 1, 2, 3 seed Indiana team. If Indiana is anything less than a 5 seed going into a tournament or throughout the regular season, I just automatically assume that those Indiana teams actually suck. Like they're just not good basketball teams, like at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Texas in basketball, kind of. I mean, Indiana is a basketball state, so you think of them kind of in a similar manner. And just Oregon, I mean, if you go and look at their schedule, all it is wins. If you just block out this one little section of their schedule where they lost
What,
5 in a row
Yeah,
in the middle of the season, which is 5 of their 8 losses.
it's insane.
And then they've won 8 in a row since then.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was one I felt strong about.
Well, I think I had mentioned it in an earlier podcast. I was like, hey, what about Oregon? Like Oregon's looking good or whatever. And then they lose like 5 in a row, like immediately after that podcast. And I was like, nope, never mind. They're Oregon. And now they've kind of got back on track to where I'm thinking like, hey, maybe Oregon's one of these dark horse teams that can make a little bit of noise in March Madness that no one's talking about.
I mean, it's possible. The Big Ten isn't
you have
bad.
a dark horse? We're getting close, Jake. Do you have a dark horse that you're liking?
I mean, what are we talking with dark horse?
I mean, just a team that no one's really talking about as it doesn't even have to be an upset team. It doesn't even have to be a double digit, seeded team making a run. It can be a Wisconsin, it can be a team that's going to be a top 3, 4 seed. That's just, kind of going under the radar a little bit.
I mean, I think St. John's being a 3 is kind of disrespectful to the season they've had. I don't see why they're not a 2 seed. I don't know.
I think the Big East has this weird thing of if you lose to a Big East team, it's a bad loss, but also winning in the Big East doesn't get you a ton of credit for whatever reason. Well, is it
what they do in the tournament every single year?
Every single year. It blows my mind. And so, yeah, I think whatever committee who chooses the March Madness brackets, they've got a weird thing against the Big East, and it's always been weird to me.
I got 2 more that I'll list, and I'm subject to change this when the actual bracket comes out. Right now, they'd ironically be playing each other in the second round, based off the bracketology. Maryland and BYU.
I kind of like this Maryland team, Jake. Yeah, I'm kind of with you on Maryland. What bracket are they in? Oh, there they are. Okay, yeah.
They're in the East right now as a 4 and a 5.
As a 4 seed. Yeah.
Maryland's a 4, BYU a 5. And I kind of like those. What I'm going to have to really do some research of when we get this bracket is start finding my upset spots. It's going to be fun when we do a bracket selection show on Sunday.
Yeah, that we can definitely do that. Yeah, they're a team that I'm kind of looking at, Jake, as maybe kind of a dark horse underdog. I kind of don't hate UCLA. They're a 6 seed right now in the West.
I'd ironically have them losing right now in their first round game.
To Drake.
Love Drake.
Yeah.
Not the singer.
And I'll be honest with you. Yeah, that's a little sus. But I'll be honest with you. I hate even mentioning them as a dark horse because I don't know if you can consider back-to-back champions a dark horse going into the tournament. But as an 8 seed, I kind of like where UConn is, and I feel really bad to where Florida would have to play them in the second round. Any 1 seed having to play UConn in the second round, I would hate that draw as a 1 seed.
Oh, I would be furious if Texas was a 1 seed and you had to play UConn in the second round. I would riot. I mean, absolutely riot. Playing the defending back-to-back champs in the second round as a 1.
Is there a conference you're completely out on?
The ACC, other than Duke.
I do believe in Duke, but yeah, even Clemson, you're no-go on Clemson?
Everyone but Duke, I'm out on.
Yeah.
As far as being like a legit, like, make a deep run team. Maybe a Sweet 16, they might have 2 teams in. But any further than that, no. Yeah.
I'm kind of with you on that. So, all right, Jake, these are just questions I'm spitballing. We're at 45 minutes. I'm enjoying the college basketball.
We'll have a lot of this on Sunday.
Yeah. I'm enjoying the basketball talk, but yes, I'm just excited. I'm so excited for March Madness because I'm starting to look at brackets like every single day. And now with Texas going on the run that they're going on, I'm like, ooh, okay, we might have a little excitement going on. So anyway, all right, that's going to do it for today's episode. We will have another one tomorrow following the Tennessee game. We're just going to keep this schedule going for as long as we possibly can until the wheels fall off. And then come Selection Sunday, Jake and I will fill out our brackets on our broadcast, and we'll get a bracket put up there for you guys as well. And we'll go through them, and we'll pick our brackets one by one. We'll go through each pick, and we'll have a national championship winner for you as we get closer and closer to March Madness. But this has been your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and help spread the word of the podcast so we can continue to give you great content each and every day. Again, for Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. As always, ladies and gentlemen, hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.